Zoom. Okay, recording is now in progress. All right, I will start again. Um, Welcome to Utah Food Allergy Network's Zoom presentation, Strategies for Living with the Allergy Overwhelm with Tamara Hubbard. We will be exploring approaches and strategies for navigating the stress, burnout, and trauma of living with food allergies. There will be a Q&A at the end, so please submit any questions you have for Tamara to me in the chat. Utah Food Allergy Network, or UFAN, is a 501c3 nonprofit food allergy resource with a medical advisory board that was established in 2007. UFAN's mission is to provide outreach to the newly diagnosed and the community at large, offering support, promoting education, building awareness of the severity of food allergies and anaphylaxis, and advocating for positive change. UFAN provides several online forums for patients to share support, recipes and substitutions, and tips for handling social situations, and we organize events such as this one today. We would like to thank UFAN sponsors. This project was made possible through a community outreach award from FAIR, the Food Allergy Research and Education. Other sponsors of UFAN are Tanner Clinic, University of Utah Health, Dermatology and Immunology, Utah PTA, and Show Your Teal. You should have received links to our sponsors' websites in your confirmation email. I encourage you to look at their links and support them as they support the food allergy community here in Utah. Tamara Hubbard, we're so grateful to have you here with us today. And she is a licensed clinical professional counselor. She's a family trained licensed therapist in private practice in the Chicago area. As the creator of the Food Allergy Counselor Directory and website, she has developed numerous internationally known allergy psychosocial resources, including the Food Allergy Counselor Directory, Exploring Food Allergy Families podcast, and therapeutic worksheets for allergic families and allergy patients. Additionally, she started the Food Allergy Behavioral Health Network to help allergy-informed clinical therapy providers connect and strengthen the allergy counseling niche. We're so lucky to have her here with us today, and we're grateful that she has agreed to present to us and help us with good food allergy mental health. And so I will turn the time over to Tamara. Just a reminder that we are recording this, and also please submit your questions in the chat, and we will have a Q&A at the end.
Awesome. Thank you for inviting me to come join your group. It's a pleasure of mine. And I'm going to just jump right in so that we save as much time as possible at the end for Q&A. The one thing I'll share about Q&A, and I'll say it again when we get to that part, is that I can't offer specific guidance because I'm not in a therapist-client relationship with any of you, but I can offer general guidance or at least point you in the right direction. So, and hopefully some of the content that I cover today will help you guys as well. So let's jump right in. I'm going to see if I can do this without difficulties myself. Let's see. Alrighty here. Can you all see it? Yes, awesome. Okay. So obviously this is strategies for, I'm going to move this. I did this last time too. I always want to see faces or that people are still here with me in this black void of a screen. Okay, so strategies for living with allergy and allergy overwhelm. And some of this will be a lot of this will be geared towards parents, but everything that I'm sharing here today can really be applied to non-parents as well, individuals managing allergies, and can be adapted and understood for kids as well. But primarily, a lot of this is going to be helpful for parents, but you'll have to adapt it yourself. So she already shared my bio, master's in marriage and family therapy. I'm involved in all these things, and I'm an allergy parent as well. So I think that that's important to mention because I not only work as a therapist in this space, but I also live this myself. So I understand from both perspectives. So I wanted to start off by sharing some data on quality of life impacts for parents. And I apologize for the phone ringing. 1 second. We have a house line and it never rings except for when I'm on a webinar, of course. So anyhow, this information I think is really important to help us really put data to what we know in our lives, right? 41% of parents report that there's a significant impact on their stress levels. 34% of parents reported that food allergy had an impact on school attendance, with 10% choosing to homeschool their children. Mothers rated their own psychological and quality of life worse than fathers rated theirs, and had higher scores than fathers on anxiety and stress. And I saw this when I did a informal survey. It was the same survey I gave to moms and dads, and 90 dads took it, and about the same number of moms took it. And it was interesting because it really supported what this research showed, is that moms tended to be a lot more emotional, anxious about things, and dads really focused on making sure that their kids could function in life even with this allergy. 1 in 4 parents reports that food allergies causes a strain on their marriage. So, this is not just an individual's diagnosis, this is a family diagnosis. And 40% of parents reported that they're experiencing hostility from other parents when trying to accommodate their child's food allergy. I would imagine you've all experienced that at some point in your journey as well. So, where's the easy button or the magic wand here? I want to start off by saying that there is no easy button or magic wand. I wish there was. So a lot of the information I'm going to present today and in the follow-up webinar are not quick answers and one-step solutions. And that is probably one of the hardest things to take in, is because, we really want some quick answers and easy solutions. But it is a process to learn how to live confidently and to minimize the stress when you're managing food allergies. So let's just start by Overwhelm 101. Okay, so the definition of overwhelm is to become overcome with emotion as a result of an amount of something, might be work, might be stress, that feels just too much to handle. That's what overwhelm means, right? If we put a definition on it. And so from that feeling, from that definition, what our mind really wants is predictability, certainty, and decreased intensity. But as we know, when we live with food allergies, we're not always able to get that. Things are not always predictable. We're not always certain about how things will go or the amount of risk. And things often might feel intense. So when we can't get that predictability, certainty, and decreased intensity, a couple things tend to happen. Our anxiety and our fear increase, and our ability to think that we can handle things decrease. So the exact opposite of what we want to happen, right? We'd like our anxiety and our fear to go down or level, and our belief in ourselves to go up. But when we feel overwhelmed and stressed, especially if it's something that's been ongoing for a long time, a stressful situation or a scenario that's been happening a long time in your life, you've been fighting with schools, you've been fighting with community organizations about safety with food allergies, then our anxiety and our fear take over, and our ability to believe that things will have a good outcome or we can handle it decreases. So I put together 4 different common traps that we get stuck in. And again, this is geared towards parents, but also can apply to individuals managing allergies as well. So this is just a quick overview, and then I'm going to jump into each of these with more information. How you'll know, you might recognize that you're in that trap, what the cost is. And when I say the cost means, what is it costing you in your life? What is it taking away or adding to your life that isn't making it workable? And then we'll go over some strategies to get yourself out of the trap, or at least start moving away from the trap. So the first trap I'll be going over is the overfunctioning trap. And I find that this is probably the most common one that I see in allergy parenting groups. And when we talk about, what does it mean to be an allergy parent? And a lot of times, if you jump into these online support groups, you'll see people wanting to do everything, right? They have to call the manufacturers every single day. They have to have binders with all the information. They basically have to be a super person. And so this is rooted in anxiety and the urge to control and do everything in order to decrease that anxiety. And it tends to lead to setting unrealistic expectations of yourself and of others. So that's a big one. The unbalanced trap is rooted in fear that if safety isn't the only value that's a priority in your life, then unsafe things will happen. And I'll come back to that again with more detail. The resentment trap, that one might be a familiar one as well. That's rooted in frustration and the desire to be heard, understood, and emotionally validated by others. And I want to step on that emotionally validated piece, because it's a common misconception that being emotionally validated means that people have to agree with how you handle something. And that's not what that means. Emotionally validated literally means you hear somebody express their emotions and their internal experience of a situation. So they may say, I'm anxious. That situation and scenario makes me feel scared. And all you would do was say, that's understandable that you feel that way. I can understand why you feel scared. It doesn't talk about how that person handles the fear or being scared. It really just makes somebody feel like they're heard and their emotions are being validated and understood. And I would be willing to guess that there are probably a lot of people out there in the allergy community who don't get emotionally validated by many people in their family, in their communities, and so on. And then the exhaustion trap. It's kind of, when you've been trapped in all these other traps, it leads to the exhaustion trap. And so it's built on these other traps. And then it tends to lead to living in unrealistic expectations because you're just too worn out to make any adjustments otherwise. So that's an overview of the 4 traps. Now let's jump in. So the overfunctioning trap. So here are some signs that you might have been stuck in the overfunctioning trap or might currently be stuck in it. You're not delegating allergy management tasks to others. You're doing everything for your food allergic child routine. And now with that one, age matters. When your kids are very little, the primary responsibility is on the parents and the adults. But as the kids grow up, we have to help them learn to take over the responsibility. So age matters with that one. If your kids are 2 and 3, of course, you're going to be doing everything for them. You consistently say no to help with allergy management. You're preoccupied with controlling everything. You're letting fear and anxiety push you into thinking you're the only one capable of keeping your child safe. And you're unable or unwilling to focus on non-allergy tasks, including fulfilling your own needs and engaging in appropriate self-care. So what are some of the costs for staying stuck in the overfunctioning trap? Well, can lead to burnout and exhaustion, that other phase. It doesn't allow others opportunities to learn and develop allergy management skills. So your child, other family members, and then when we want to go delegate something to somebody else in our family, we can't because they don't know how to care for our child with a food allergy. It limits the ability for you to feel confident in others, as I said, others' ability to manage the food allergy. It leads to increased anxiety. And then when we're anxious, and we're not talking about a little bit of anxiety, but when we live in this space of increased intense anxiety all the time, we tend to get more rigid. And that's not helpful in life because all of a sudden, everything has a really rigid definition. There are rigid rules. And you'll notice your world feels like it's getting smaller because everything is just so intense and so rigid. And so we really want to build in flexibility safely because we can have safety and flexibility at the same time. And I'm going to talk about that more in the next webinar that I'm doing. We have unrealistic goals and expectations because we're trying to be perfect and never have any risk and always have control, which, by the way, we can't. We have growing resentment, and there might be marital strain or family strain and tension. So what can we do about this? So to get out of the overfunctioning trap, our overall goals are to notice. Number one, noticing is a big therapeutic strategy. And you'll see in all of these traps, the first one is noticing. And it's there on purpose because a lot of times we're so stuck in these traps that we don't actually notice that we're in them. And so noticing, although it feels like we're not doing much, is the first step to recognizing something isn't working well and we need to make some change. So noticing unhelpful thoughts, noticing anxiety, urges to control, and the unwillingness to change or delegate. We need to address our fears, We need to fill in any knowledge or skills gaps. So that's a big one. And especially if you have kids who are now teens, and there hasn't been an allergic reaction in years, yourself or your kids may need to revisit some of the information about food allergies and that stage in your life, and then fill in those gaps. Because if you're feeling like, oh, I don't know if I can trust my teen, maybe the reason is because the teen needs to revisit what it means to be safe with a food allergy. Maybe they've forgotten how important it is to be safe because they haven't had an allergic reaction in many years. And then we need to address this perceived versus actual risk. That is something that will come up in other traps, but that's something that needs to happen with the allergist. That's different for every person because every person's allergies are specific to them. And so we need to understand what I mean by perceived versus actual. Is perceived is emotionally, we feel like things are much bigger risk and scary because of our fear and anxiety, but the actual risk may be less or more, but different. And that's something that working with your allergist will be helpful to figure out in different scenarios. And then we have to address discomfort around delegating, because when we start to delegate and move away from over functioning and doing everything, we're going to be very uncomfortable about that. As I said before, we need to redefine the perceptions of safety and risk, and we need to take rigid rules and add more flexibility. So here are some strategies to help you work towards those goals to get out of this overfunctioning trap. Stop and jot. All of our feelings and thoughts are valid. We label them negative or positive, helpful, unhelpful. We don't need to label them. They're just feelings. They're thoughts. Thoughts are just thoughts. They don't actually have any power. Feelings are just a way to express what's inside of us, although they feel uncomfortable at times. And so if you write things down and get it out of your head, it's also going to help you see where your patterns are. What do you do when you're anxious? What do you do when somebody asks to help and you say, no, 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 I'm not comfortable with that? So writing all of that down can be a useful strategy. Being present in the moment is also really helpful. And so what I mean by that is we get stuck in our minds and we need to be in the moment so we can act accordingly. Tools to help tolerate discomfort. So that would be things like deep breathing. Physically moving can be good because it gets nervous energy out. The clouds in the sky, if you Google that, clouds in the sky, leaves on a stream, it's an acceptance and commitment therapy strategy. I highly recommend it. The basis of it is that we have a ton of different thoughts and feelings at any given time, but we tend to just focus on one at a time. And instead, can we pull back and notice all sorts of different thoughts and feelings? So can we look in the sky and see all sorts of different clouds and maybe not focus on just one of them? So that's the theory behind that tolerating discomfort strategy. We need to focus on influence rather than control. Again, how can we positively impact a situation and the outcome rather than try to control everything? And again, talk with our allergist about how to assess risk. Let's move to the unbalanced trap. I can say that I was in this trap when I first started allergy parenting a decade ago. I was finding myself up late at night, every night, researching everything under the sun having to do with food allergies. I was sure there was stones left unturned that I had to find and turn over and learn, because if not, my son wasn't going to be safe. And I found that everything I focused on was allergies. And so I lost connection with myself. I was just an allergy parent. I saw myself as an allergy parent and forgot who the other side of me was. For a while, I lost some connection with friends, those who weren't managing allergies. And I wasn't doing hobbies or things that I enjoyed because I was spending all of my time researching about food allergies. So what were the potential costs to me and anyone else who's stuck in this trap? Well, we live as a label rather than a person. So we live as the allergic individual, the allergy parent, the allergic family, right? And that's the label we use all the time, forgetting that there are a million other parts to who we are and who our family is. We also live primarily focused on what we've lost, that loss of normalcy, the loss of what we thought parenthood would look like, the loss of what we thought our life would look like without a food allergy. We lose knowing who we are. There's loss of friendships or relationships or strain and tension and conflict in relationships because somebody might say to us, hey, you're spending all your time focusing on food allergies. We miss you at Pokino, or we miss you at the Bridge Club, or whatever we're involved in, the crafting club, right? Loss of activities that make you feel good, and an inability to prioritize yourself and other important experiences in your life. One of the things that's really common in families that manage allergies or life impacting or chronic conditions is that because we focus on safety so much and we make it a priority, as it should be, we forget that there are other important things that we need to be focusing on as well. So we might forgo connection, right? Family gatherings, going to movies, trying to find ways to travel. We might forgo that because safety is the primary value we're focused on. But there are ways, a lot of the times, not always, where we can have both, but it may take some figuring out and problem solving in ways that are uncomfortable. So what can we do in the unbalanced trap? Well, again, there's that notice, right? So we want to start by noticing, are we focusing on feelings of loss? Are we really focusing on unhelpful thoughts and assumptions? Are we labeling ourselves as an allergic person, the allergy family, the allergy parent, right? This can be helpful when we're in a community of people, sure, but like outside of that, we need to have other parts to ourselves. And then resentment when we're not able to focus on ourselves, and guilt when we do. That's a big one as well. How dare I take time for myself? I have to be an allergy parent all the time. And we need to assess how we spend our time, if we tend to push non-allergy tasks aside, and then reprioritize our whole self, all the parts of you, including non-allergy tasks and things in your life. Strategies to help with this. Well, we need to identify helpers. There's only so many hours in a day and so many days in a week. And going back to that overfunctioning trap, if we try to do everything, we will be overfunctioning and burning ourselves out and end up in the exhaustion trap. So we need to identify helpers so you can take a break and do something for yourself. And if we can't, we need to train helpers so that we can have at least one person, whether it's someone in your food allergy community or a family member, who can help you take some time for yourself. We need to redefine what being a good allergy parent means. You remember the rule on the planes? It's been a while since many of us have traveled because of the pandemic, but they say, put your air mask on first. And there's a reason for that. We can't help other people if we don't help ourselves first. And so as an allergy parent, that is a very important thing to remember. And we may have guilt about that, but we have to work through that guilt and make sure we're taking care of ourselves. We need to communicate our needs, let people know what we need, let people know what we're missing, what losses we're feeling. Just communicate about our feelings with other people and lean into your support group so we feel like we can be honest about that. And then reestablish connections and re-engage in hobbies that we have pushed aside to be the allergy parent. I love this picture of this little kid. I don't know. I'm not even sure if that shows resentment, but I had to put it in somewhere because it was just such a cute picture. So I put it in the resentment trap slide. So the next one is resentment trap. And I see this one a lot in the food allergy groups online, right? Frustration, anger. Why don't they get it? Nobody understands, right? It tends to stem from overwhelming emotions of, again, frustration, anger. And then it tends to hold you back from problem solving. When we're overly focused on the emotions, they have a reason to be there, the emotions, right? My goal with emotions when I work with clients is, how can we be curious about them? What are they here for? What do your emotions want you to know? And it's not always what's at the surface, right? So when we're anxious, we might think we're anxious because something's unsafe. Maybe not. Let's take a look underneath. Why are we anxious? And so when we are overly frustrated or overly angry about the fact that people don't understand what it's like to live with a food allergy, and they're not being helpful in living with a food allergy, then we tend to be focused just on emotions and we lose the ability to problem solve how to navigate the situation. You might find yourself in this trap if you have thoughts often like, I could manage allergies well if others just understood or helped or they got it, right? I see that one all the time. I felt that one before as well. We might be in that trap if we notice we're communicating aggressively rather than assertively. And there is a difference, right? And that the way that we communicate does have an impact on whether people will be willing to help or not. And if conversations tend to get heated and highly emotional, we might be in that resentment trap as well. So what could this cost us by staying stuck? Well, we get stuck in the if only struggle. And that leads to this cycle of wishful thinking, which in acceptance and commitment therapy terms is called creative hopelessness. It keeps us from working towards accepting and truly engaging in life. And literally, we sit in that if only, I wish, and then we never move forward. We sort of stay stuck. Again, it focuses, if we're stuck here, the cost is it focuses on external control. So because other people, maybe a school or a church, are not being very helpful in making sure your child is safe, or they're not navigating food allergies in a way that you feel is safe enough, then we start focusing on what they're not doing instead of focusing on what we can be doing, right? And it may not be what we'd like it to look like, but there may be some wiggle room in between. Or we might decide there is no way to make ends meet, and we have to separate from that church or that community organization or that group. And it can lead to over avoidance of experiences, our own feelings of discomfort, and people in general. So what do we do if we're in the resentment trap? Well, there's that notice again. We notice our feelings of resentment. We start by noticing our frustration and our distrust in others. We recognize when we need to control and how that becomes a priority, right? Again, what are they not doing that's keeping me from being able to live my life in a way that I feel safe with my allergy or my child's allergy? We need to alter our perspective. So we need to focus on learning to live with discomfort and unhelpful people. That is one of the hardest ones, I think, in the allergy community, right? We see people making jokes about allergies, right? We see people saying hurtful things about people with allergies. Just don't fly, don't get on a plane if you have an allergy, don't live your life if you have an allergy, right? And we have to live and teach our kids how to live with all of that. Again, going back to the easy button and the magic wand, we don't have any of that for this. So we can be angry about it. We can be frustrated. All feelings are welcome at the table, but we can't stay stuck in that because that impairs us from being able to teach our kids or ourselves how to do and live life in a way that works for us. So that's the big key point. If you take nothing else away from this presentation, take that away from it. When we're in resentment, we need self-compassion. We need to engage in more kindness towards ourselves, especially when we're going through a difficult situation, right? You'll see in the strategies how to practice self-compassion. A really key, easy way to do it is to ask yourself, what would I say to a friend in this situation? And 9 times out of 10, we are much nicer and kinder to our friends than we are to ourselves. We tend to judge how we navigate a situation, or we're critical of it. But when we guide a friend through a tough situation, or we share our thoughts with a friend, it would be a lot kinder. So if you're going through a tough situation at school or a church function, or there's something where you've been struggling and you're developing that resentment for people or organizations, ask yourself, what would I say to a friend in this situation? And that's the guidance that you need to be taking. We need to work towards that acceptance of the diagnosis, of the uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, of the fact that we're going to be living with discomfort, not just having the diagnosis, but the discomfort of being around people who don't get it. Again, focusing on how we can influence the outcome rather than aiming for control. That's another big piece to take away from this entire webinar. And then leaning into support. Again, to receive that emotional validation is huge. And so what I love about UFAN is that it's a really well organized, wonderful support group with so many connections that can help with support and making sure that you have somebody you can turn to, or pick up a phone or email or call and say, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling resentful, I'm feeling burnt out or exhausted. And somebody who's been there before will say, I hear that. I get that. You have every right to feel that way. And that's important. We need that when we're living with a chronic health condition. And we also need to make sure, as hard as it is, when we're very upset and angry towards somebody or an organization, that we aim for calm, fact-based, assertive conversations rather than really high, intensely emotional conversations. Let's keep it fact-based. Make sure that they can connect with an allergist themselves if they need to learn a little bit more about how to be allergy friendly. Give them facts, even though we want to just yell at them and say, you're making our lives miserable, you just don't get it. And the exhaustion trap, which is really the accumulation of all of the traps all together, which sometimes we're stuck in all of them at the same time. So more often than not, you feel burnt out by allergy care. This is the point where you're like, I just can't keep doing this. This just feels like it's never ending. I can't imagine my life like this forever. We avoid people, we avoid places and things, so we just don't have to deal with it. We kind of retreat. We experience physical and emotional fatigue. We're detached. We don't want to find solutions. We don't have the energy for any of that at this point. So what are the costs if we find ourselves stuck in this trap? Well, we tend to have the freeze response when we get here rather than the fight, flight. We have the freeze response, which in reality would look like, if we're like giving an example, would be when an animal plays dead. There's somebody coming towards it and they're playing dead so that the threat goes away, instead of running towards it and being big bad and fighting it, or running far away in the opposite direction. Like if we saw a bear in the wild, we would just play dead, like we're just done. That's really how our response is at this point. We're unable to find workable solutions or approaches to difficult situations. We're too tired to do that. We're not willing to prioritize ourselves and our self-care because we have guilt when we do it, or we're too tired to figure it out. We're disconnected. What can we do if we're here? So we have to notice again, if we're feeling burnt out, detached, overly negative about life with allergies, we're avoiding a lot of things. We're shutting down. We're getting angry if we have to focus on any of this. We also need to evaluate what's working well and what's not working well. We have to identify what's the most taxing aspects of allergy life so that we can find more workable approaches and start delegating tasks to other people. One of the terms that I use all the time when I work with clients is workable. And so I don't necessarily use healthy or unhealthy, because what might be healthy and unhealthy to one may be different for the other. So I use the term workable, and that's what I would encourage you to think about in terms of your own life. Is how you're approaching allergies working for you well? Is it not? I hate to say, I kind of always say, like, I'm going to use a Dr. Philism. How's that working for you? Is it working for you? Is it not working for you? So think of your strategies and your approaches in allergy life or a difficult situation. Does that work for you? Does it not? And there's that self-care again. And I don't mean sitting in a bubble bath and reading a book for self-care. If you enjoy doing that for self-care, that's wonderful. But that's not what self-care means. That's not all self-care is. Self-care is putting your needs at some point ahead of something else, right? Putting off the laundry, putting off researching again about allergy care stuff, just to do something for 10 minutes that's about you, that's fulfilling for you. So what are some strategies to help us get out of the exhaustion trap? Again, focusing on influence rather than aiming to control everybody. We cannot have control over everything. And if that's our goal, we're constantly going to be let down, and we're constantly going to be frustrated and resentful towards other people. Leaning into support, making lists. So make a list about what needs to get done, what can wait, prioritize. And also on those lists, focus on the actions and skill building rather than the emotions you're feeling, right? So rather than saying, how do I get out of the exhaustion trap? Well, I want to be less anxious. I want to be less frustrated. Well, write down what actions you can take to achieve that and what skills you may need to build to get there, right? You may need more information from your allergist in order to navigate a really tough situation with a school, or you may need to get them involved to help you guys navigate that rather than taking it all on yourself, right? And over functioning. And then taking breaks, giving yourself permission. Permission's huge. We can give ourselves permission to take breaks from highly stressful situations in order to rebuild ourselves. So maybe, this entire school year, it's been butting heads with a school system or a teacher or an individual at school. Can you give yourself a break from fighting that fight for just a little bit? Is there a way that you can sort of pull back and either have somebody else come help you with that, or maybe just say, you know what, for the summer, we're not going to interact with that group. We're going to take a break from soccer. We're going to take a break from this, that, or the other. Give yourself a break to rebuild yourself. Okay, so we're going to get a little audience feedback here. Anybody feel that they're in these traps currently or have experienced them before? Do these traps feel familiar? Have you seen friends in these traps? Is any of this resonating with living with allergies? Feel free to throw anything in the chat box or hop on and share a little bit about how this affects you. If you've been here, if you're currently here, I don't want to put anyone on the spot either. So I'll just see if anyone wants to throw anything in the chat box about, yep, I've been there, I've experienced that. And if not, we'll just keep moving on because I don't want to put anyone on the spot if they're not comfortable. So I went back. Okay.
Well, I know in the last 18 and a half years of navigating food allergies, I think I've experienced all of those. So I think this is super helpful to stop and think, okay, what can I do? Where can I give myself a break? And when I realized that I could give myself a break, like for the summer, uh, and just say, we're not going to girls' camp. We're going to do our own girls' camp and plan something else that was fun with my daughter. It lifted such a load off my chest and made me feel so much better and happier and healthier, mentally healthier.
Yeah. And what you've really just described is this rigidity that we get ourselves into, right? We want it to be the way we want it to be. And I don't blame any of us for feeling that way. That speaks to the loss of what we thought we'd be able to do as a family, as parents, as an allergic individual, right? But when it's just not working, when it's just butting heads and you're getting exhausted and you're stuck in these traps, you have to redefine and add flexibility just like you did, right? Because the goal is, how do we have a good time? How do we make memories? How do we make connections? And if we keep trying to do something that's not working, we're not going to get any of that. So that's a cost, right? It's going to cost us the opportunity to make memories, to have fun, do any of those things. So that's where that flexibility and where that question you ask yourself, is this working, has to come in. So I love that you figured out and you needed a break from doing what wasn't working, right? And again, we can be frustrated that we're put in these positions to have to make those choices. Yeah, that's called processing the loss. This is grief. We're doing grief work when we're living with a diagnosis, right? Whether we're grieving the fact that we have to live life with this, or we're grieving after a particularly traumatic experience, which we'll talk about in a second. There's grief work in living with food allergies and allergic conditions. And grief does not necessarily go away. What happens is there's a really great, and I didn't add it in here, but there's a really great image out there. If you just search grief, I'm not sure if it'll come up there, but in any case, what we think happens with grief is that our grief shrinks. So maybe it's, grief about the loss of normalcy for us, or grief of a loss of a loved one, whatever the grief is about. We think over time that grief gets smaller, but what actually happens is grief stays the same. It's still there. Our world around it gets bigger, right? We learn how to have more space around that grief and hold it gently, right? So that's really what we're living with food allergies and allergic conditions as well. So let me see. Speaking of trauma, I wanted to add a couple slides in here about trauma, because the next presentation I do is really more focused on anxiety. So I thought this was the appropriate place to put this. I've given the definition here from the National Child Traumatic Stress Network of what trauma is. And I'm not going to sit and read it because you can read it on your own. The big thing to take away from this is that we tend to think trauma has to be something that's huge, major, right? But there are little traumas, there are small traumas, right? And so anything that feels traumatic for us that refers to, stress that's psychological and physiological, like medical trauma, is considered trauma, right? If it's impactful in our lives and leaves us with traumatic stress reactions, that's trauma. We aren't all walking around with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but we can have post-traumatic stress responses, right? So we don't need to be clinically diagnosed with it, but we can still feel those feelings, right? So this is often the case when you've had a very severe allergic reaction, traumatic allergic reaction or a situation. And three main types of traumatic stress reactions are the re-experiencing, so thinking about the event a lot, re-experiencing in our minds the actual story of the reaction. Avoidance, so that may look like in yourself or your child, you want to avoid thinking or talking about the event because it's just too painful. And hyperarousal, excessive focus on physical sensations and our fears. And there may be additional fears that have grown since that reaction, right? So now we notice that ourselves or our child are avoiding other foods, categories of foods, whole experiences. We now have more generalized anxiety because of the result of the traumatic stress response to an allergic reaction that was traumatic. And this website here, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, is a wonderful website. It's geared a lot towards some of those bigger traumas, but they do have a section under there for medical traumas. And so there's a lot of helpful resources on there that may apply and may not be helpful, but it's a good website to know. And so how do we navigate allergy related or medical traumas, right? Well, psychological first aid is huge, and having trauma-informed therapy or trauma-informed therapists can be helpful as well. And so you can see on the left the treatment principles for psychological first aid. It's really about recreating safety, right? Involving the person who feels the trauma in problem solving and self-care. It's about creating hope, right? That we're not just going to be stuck with hopelessness our whole lives. It's about creating calm. And so that means in particularly the examples of us as a parent parenting a child who might have had a severe allergic reaction, we have to work on calming ourselves. Putting our oxygen mask on first, it really is important. We might be met by guilt when we do so. And I won't go into what we would do with that guilt because there's not enough time, but we have to know that we have to take care of ourselves in order to help our kids through tough things. And then connecting, right? So this is first aid for psychological trauma. And I haven't read this book, but I wanted to share it. It's Emotional First Aid for Children, Compassion and Action, How to Quickly Help in Times of Trouble. And had wonderful reviews. And I think it really could be applicable here for parents whose kids are feeling traumatic responses to a really fearful allergic reaction or intense allergic reaction. So I put that there as well. So real quickly, I want to go through a couple of scenarios here because I know we're running low on time. So one of the scenarios might be you're dealing with a lack of allergy-related support within your community. This impacts your ability to trust others and feel that your child is safe, and therefore you start avoiding situations. And so I have listed some approaches. And again, it doesn't have to be in this exact order, but these are some of the things that you would want to consider if you were stuck in that situation in real life. And again, we're going to aim for calm, factually based communication, especially when we're very emotional. We want to assess safety risks by doing a risk evaluation, exploring the perceived versus actual risks of the situation, and work with your allergist on that one. You want to focus on your influence rather than your lack of control. You want to adjust your mindset to work with the reality of what is. So if there really is no way to navigate, a church setting or a school setting or a sport or activity setting in a way that feels safe enough for you and your child, then we have to work with what is there, right? There's that we can't change everyone and everything around us. So what do we do with that? That's the mindset we have to work with. That's that acceptance piece that's really hard sometimes. And we have to equip our child with the skills and strategies to self-advocate, stay safe, and if needed, to work with the mindset of we can't be a part of that team. We can't be a part of that group, unfortunately, because it's just not safe enough. And again, if it's absolutely unworkable, avoiding the situation, and then of course, processing the discomfort, frustration, and resentment you might be feeling is important too. Here's another real life scenario that I thought might be useful because I see this a lot. Perhaps you've joined an online support group, and I don't mean to knock online support groups because they have a whole lot of value, but it's easiest for us nowadays to go online to support groups rather than in person anymore. So perhaps you are checking out some support groups online and you feel overwhelmed and anxious after visiting them. And you start thinking to yourself, am I doing enough to stay safe or keep my child safe? Should I be doing everything everyone else is doing, like calling every brand or having a binder or whatever it is that people are saying, right? And everyone's got different experiences. Well, that's exactly what you need to remind yourself, right? We have to use perspective taking. Not everyone's experience will be yours. Not every scenario will have the same outcome, even if you have the same allergies and the same or similar scenarios. Not every outcome is going to be the same. So that person's outcome will not likely be your exact outcome either. It's normal for us to feel anxious when we hear about others' experiences. And we have to remind ourselves that practicing our allergy safety skills and reviewing your action plan can feel reassuring for ourselves and our kids as well. And so really, it's important to just ground yourself in your own allergy, not other people's allergies and situations. And again, this is where allergists can be very helpful too. I wanted to throw in that on the Food Allergy Counselor website, there's a number of therapeutic worksheets that can help with anxiety and overwhelm and mindset work. I've created all of these. So I've placed food allergy and different kinds of therapeutic concepts together, like the urge to control, mindset work, thinking traps, which is very cognitive behavioral approach. And I've created a number of worksheets there. They're really nominal fees. None of them are very expensive, but I have a 10% off code through next Sunday. Yes, today is Sunday to double check. Through next Sunday, May 1st. And I know a lot of people might be watching this back. So the code is UFAN 10. And if you put that in at checkout, you'll get 10% off at any time throughout this week. It's not limited to one time. You can use it however many times you want to this week. And here are some other resources that might be helpful to navigate the overwhelm. So if you don't know about Allergic Living's magazine, they have a specific edition called the Food Allergy Anxiety Guide, which I found to be very helpful. It's got not just guidance from professionals and providers, but also real life stories from families in the community and how they've overcome different anxieties and fears and phobias related to life with food allergies. The podcast that I host is on hiatus currently, but there's 2 seasons of episodes. I think there's 21 episodes, the latest of which was a 2-part with my friend Jo Frost, who's also known as Super Nanny. For those that don't know, she has her own food allergies, and so she shares a lot about it and a little bit of an insight into how her show works, which I thought was fascinating. And then this book is not an allergy book, but for adults and parents, I thought it was useful to put on there. It's called Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And it's a really good look at the fact that there is a stress cycle. And when a stressor is removed, we can still feel stress until we complete that cycle. And everyone has to figure out how to complete their own stress cycle. So I wanted to throw that up there as well. And there's more allergy behavioral health resources on that section on the Food Allergy Counselor website. If you're not signed up to get Food Allergy Counselor emails, I would recommend signing up. I promise I won't spam you. I don't have time to spam people. I send monthly emails unless something big and important comes up. I'll send it out in real time. But when you sign up for that, you'll get access to download the Allergy and Anxiety Overwhelm mini guide. It's a 3-page guide with a couple of strategies to navigate and manage anxiety and overwhelm. I share a lot of tips, mindful tips. I share resources that are not food allergy counselor related, so other things in the community. I am currently working on a book right now, and it is going to be using mindfulness and acceptance commitment therapy strategies to manage the overwhelm and anxiety of food allergy parenting. So I'll give updates on that and subscriber exclusives and discounts. And so you can sign up right on the pop-up on the website. It's probably the easiest place, or on the homepage at the bottom. And here's all my contact information on social media. I have way too many social media accounts. I made it a lot harder for myself than I needed to. On the therapist Tamara accounts, I don't always talk about food allergies, but I work a lot with women and moms and parents. And so I'll have a lot of stuff on those accounts just about general parenthood and life. I always welcome you to reach out and connect with me. And if there's anything I can ever do to help you guys, just reach out. So thank you so much for joining today. And I think we'll turn it over for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Tamara, for presenting to us. This is super helpful. I want to remind everybody that Tamara is also presenting to us on May 15th. And that presentation is called Understanding and Befriending Your Allergy Anxiety. And so remember to register and sign up for that one as well. If you have any questions, you can either put them in the chat. Also in the chat box, I put a link to give us some feedback on this presentation. So if you would remember to please do that, give us some feedback. I don't see any questions in the chat. If you want to ask your own question, just unmute yourself and you can go ahead and ask that yourself if you'd like.
Or even share an experience that you're going through, and or I know it's hard to share that, but know that you're dealing, sitting here with two allergy parents as well. So I've been there. My own son has been through trial. We've been through a trial, treatments. I've seen him anaphylax multiple times. So I have sort of seen it all as a mom.
Well, and I thought it was very helpful what you were saying about if a situation is completely unworkable, giving yourself permission just to accept your comments about grief. I think that that's so important. You have to learn to just accept that this is what it is. I think sometimes as allergy parents, we work so hard. We work 10 times harder than other parents trying to make our child be able to be included safely and do everything that everybody else is doing. And it does lead to overwhelm. I know I've experienced that. But I think that when I finally gave myself permission to say, it's okay to not do everything, and do things differently. And my experience doesn't look like the next person. And I think that's okay. And I think that's important to remember.
And it's scary to do that, to give ourselves permission. And I think the next webinar that I'm doing will really kind of bridge the gap between, okay, great, how do we give ourselves permission to do that? And what do we do when we start feeling anxious about that and uncomfortable about giving ourselves permission to do that? So that would be a plug to come to the next one too.
I'm not seeing any.
I think I saw one question pop up.
Okay.
Do you have any resources for starting OIT related anxiety, which is a fabulous question? Yes. So I'm losing track. There's at least one, if not two, podcast episodes. So the podcast name is Exploring Food Allergy Families. You can access it on the Food Allergy Counselor website, or you can find it on any podcast app out there. There's at least one, I'm thinking is there two? You know what? One of them is about oral food challenges, which we know is obviously really related to oral immunotherapy. And then there's another episode, which is a two-part with myself and another food allergy informed therapist out of Stanford, Marte Matthews. And we talk about the powers and the power struggles and the issues and anxiety around oral immunotherapy. Additionally, there's a couple of worksheets. There's a child worksheet on navigating and preparing for oral immunotherapy and oral food challenges. And then there is one for adults and parents as well. And then I'm trying to remember, I don't know if I've done a webinar or a blog post on it. It's been so long since I've written a blog post on it. But if there's a specific question pertaining to the OIT process that you want to throw in there, I might be able to offer some additional guidance as well. One of the tips that I give that we've personally used ourselves, which can help sort of diffuse some of the anxiety in an oral food challenge or oral immunotherapy dosing, is if anyone's ever heard of Jelly Belly's Bean Boozled. So the Bean Boozled kit is a bunch of good flavored jelly beans and not so good flavored jelly beans. We're talking grass clippings, canned dog food, used baby wipes. They're really not good. And so I'll recommend that people will, parents can take a dose of a really awful jelly bean while their child is taking a dose of their oral immunotherapy allergen or at oral food challenge. So that's one strategy that can maybe lighten the mood as well during a food challenge or oral immunotherapy. But if there's other specific questions about the anxiety, pop them in the chat and I'd be happy to give more guidance.
And for some reason, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. I didn't even see that one. So maybe
I
you're
think it went direct. It went to direct. I know I always get confused when I put questions in because like you can choose where they go. And I'm always like, I'm not sure where I'm sending this question. I just put it out there. So
right.
Oh, I just wanted to say thanks for sharing this information. It's great just as a parent to know that you're not crazy and that these are normal feelings. So I totally appreciate that. We've been doing this for about 9 years. And so this is great information. I'm going to share it with friends. I'm also a nurse, so I do run into patients occasionally.
yeah.
So I think this is fabulous information. And just to give ourselves permission that, those allergy groups online, which are great, and we get a lot of information from, I do find that they do increase my
Yes.
anxiety frequently. And so I
Yes.
have found that sometimes I just have to like snooze them for a month
Smart.
just to
Yeah. You
kind of
know
give
what?
myself a break.
Yeah, and thank you for what you do as a nurse, because that's not an easy job either. But wherever anyone's nursing, it's a tough job, period. So thank you for what you do. But yeah, what I tell people is, and what I've noticed again is that food allergy online or any online group, whether it's food allergies or other medical conditions, if there's a high percentage of newly diagnosed, the anxiety tends to be higher in that group, if you've ever noticed that, right? So if you're in a group where there's a lot of newbies, which they need their information too, and they're putting every single question they could think of in there, that tends to push the balance towards a lot more anxiety. And also what we notice is that those that have been in the allergy space, for many years and are kind of well-known and got their footing down and, don't really need these support groups anymore, they tend to phase themselves out of these groups. And so that leads to that imbalance in those allergy groups as well, right? There's not, a voice of experience coming in and saying, hey guys, you can do this, right? It might just be a bunch of newer people in the space responding and having a dialogue between the two of them. So I love your approach of snoozing it. That's what I recommend to people. If you are feeling more anxious when you leave the group, that is the opportunity to say, might not be the right group for me right now. The other thing too is every group will be useful in its own way and at different times, right? This group might have been helpful when you first were diagnosed, no longer helpful anymore. This group might be helpful because now you've got a child who's a teen. Now that one's helpful to you. So really assess when you go into those groups, what is it you're hoping to get out of it? Or what are you hoping to offer those that are new on this journey? And if you feel you can't get that or offer that, yeah, snooze it. It's okay.
Does anyone else have any questions? As far as the group goes, I appreciate that the Utah Food Allergy Network, our Facebook group, I appreciate that experienced people stay on there because I love and I actually joined because I didn't have it as a newbie and I joined to actually give feedback and share back, you know. So I appreciate when people do that as well. So
Yeah.
if you're mental in a place mentally that you can do that, I think that's important to do.
And
Because
not everyone will feel that they can do that. I think that's important to say too, is I did a post on the food allergy counselor blog at one point about kind of the phases that, the advocacy phases, right? And so some people will decide that when they've got their footing, they want to be there for other people. And some people will decide, you know what, I can't do that. It's the same thing in therapy, right? Those of us that are allergy informed and clinically trained, sure, we can offer those services to people, but some of us will say, we don't want to do that. That's not a space we want to be in. And that's absolutely okay if you say to yourself, you know what's best for me is to step out of the group. But for those that can offer the hand holding and the guidance, it's so needed. But again, the online food allergy space, there's a lot of information out there, a lot of information, and not all of it is helpful. Not all of it is really factual. And a lot of it may be built on perceived anxiety, perceived fears. And that's why it's important to bring those concerns. You're reading something, should I be doing that? Am I not a good allergy parent because I don't do that? Bring that conversation back to your allergist and have that conversation. The other point I'll make on that is that the more conversations we have with our allergists and allergy care team about the psychosocial impacts that living with a food allergy or allergic disease has on us, the more important they'll know that needs to be explored, right? So there aren't a ton, to my knowledge, of allergy practices that make it a priority to sit and ask about anxiety levels and impacts on life. And if the allergy practices you're at do, great, because that's not necessarily the standard of care yet. So what I tell people is talk to your allergy care teams, your allergists about that. They have to know that these are conversations they have to be having to help their patients live a full, empowered life with allergies.
that's true. That's true. And I actually find that my life has gone in phases of when I've been able to offer that hand holding and when I have to step back.
Yeah.
And as I have approached different allergists about these presentations, a couple have been super excited about it and like, oh, we have to send this out to all of our patients. And they sent it out to 1,000+ patients this week, advertising this because they have understood that this is a problem and it's important, an important issue to start to discuss, because it hasn't, like you say, it's not the standard of care right now, and it hasn't been that for. But I appreciate that it's increasing. Not that awareness is being increased.
And that was one of the reasons why I started all of this in 2018, was to really push that forward, and then help therapists get involved in this niche to support all of you. And in the allergist defense, the reason why a lot of times this isn't a part of patient care is because the models that they work within don't allow for the extra time with patients or hiring an extra person to come in and do this work and stuff. So it's hard. They may want to add more of this into patient care, but they're not able to currently do it within their model. So they seek out opportunities to send patients to webinars and educational seminars and things like that. But you're right, it is becoming a lot more in the forefront. There's a lot more research studies on the psychosocial impacts, anxiety, and things like that. Every national conference I go to, there's more and more sessions about it. So have hope, guys. Things are changing. They're slow, but they're changing. And the more that we talk to our allergy care teams about this, the more they'll be able to put that into practice as well. I'm trying to, there was something else I was going to say too that was related to that. And of course it slipped my mind. Something related to that. And of course it slipped my mind. Nope, it's gone. I'm sure
Well,
whatever it was important, but I can't remember what it was.
well, that's okay. I just was doing something. I don't know what I did with my. I did something here. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, I guess we can go ahead and end this. Please make sure that you click on the link that I put in the chat to give us some feedback, just some very basic questions, some feedback on watching this. And also remember to register and sign up for May 15th's presentation, Befriending Your Food Allergy Anxiety. And we're excited that Tamara is helping us with this mental health initiative this year with UFAN. And we appreciate all of you for attending and appreciate Tamara for presenting to us. And I think that that's all we have today. So thank you so much for being with us for this Sunday evening.
Thank you for inviting me. It was my pleasure.